Welcome to the Linux Spotlight. This show is dedicated to showing off the best thing about Linux, our community. This community is made up of developers, distro maintainers, YouTubers, and everyday users. Each one plays a vital role in our community, and the goal is to have a discussion with each individual about their journey into Linux and beyond. So join me now as we turn the spotlight on. Hello, I'm your host, Rocco, and with me today, our special guest is Monica Ayhens Madon. How are you, Monica?
I'm good. How about you?
I am doing excellent. I have coffee with me, and we're going to talk about Linux, so we're good.
Iced tea, so I am all set.
All right, let's do it. So there are going to be a lot of people in the Linux world that know you behind the scenes for contributions to Ubuntu Mate and just being a all-around Linux enthusiast. So that is what some people will know you for. But, you know, the show is designed to let people know who you guys are personally. So who is Monica Ayhens Madon personally?
Well, I like to say that I am a Hufflepuff in Ravenclaw clothing, that my core thing is just helping people out however I can, whether it's kind of for my job or with friends. I've always kind of been the friend mom. Like when we go to convention, I'm the one who loads us up with snacks and about 5 different kinds of tea for 2 days. I love getting the chance to meet new people, which has been really hard the past few months to do that in person. But I think that that's really just that's the core of who I am. And also anyone who knows me from the food Telegram groups, yeah, I'm that obsessed with food all the time. That's not just me on the internet, that's me in person too.
Yep. Well, we're going to get into that in a little bit. So,
yeah.
But what is it that you do for a day job?
Actually, I am a writing tutor at a technical college here in the Atlanta metro area. And so what I do is students come to me with either a paper that they've written or a writing assignment that they just got. And I work with them to really kind of get their thoughts out, get their thoughts organized, and get those thoughts as clear and well argued as possible. So I get to work with students who are going to become nurses, EMTs, cybersecurity people, all kinds of things. And so it's a really great group of students that I get to work with. And I really miss seeing them. So because now it's all on the phone or video conference.
Yeah. Well, that
Yeah.
has to be, I guess, very rewarding as a job to do, but also very hard sometimes, depending on who you're working with.
It is. Thankfully I don't have too many tough students, the ones who you give them suggestions and they just don't want to hear them. And I've learned to try not to take that personally. It's like, okay, it's like this, it's not my paper. But thankfully I have more students who will come in at the end of the semester and be like, I got an A. It's like, oh, I did good on that paper. And just, I mean, especially since you don't go into tutoring for the money. That's for certain. But I think just seeing students grow and get more confident, because I think writing is one of those things that people are just like, I'm a bad writer. Like they had some horrible incident and they're convinced that they can't write. And it's like, no, nobody's born a great writer. You practice, you find what your strengths are and you build on them. And that's what I love helping students do. And I like just having students going from, oh my God, I hate English class to I'm going to sign up for one next term, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I want to read a quote of yours that you mentioned in one of your bios, and it says, most of us have had a teacher or teachers who inspired us to change our lives for the better and look beyond our doubts. I am hoping to use my education background and increasing technical proficiency to help other educators make powerful, meaningful impacts in the lives of their students. And, a few episodes back, I talked to Leo Chavez of Mintcast, and that was a great conversation. And he mentioned in there that he had a teacher that really made a big impact on him. And it made an impact on the direction of his life, where he is now as well. So obviously, teaching is an important part of your life. But I also want to quote something else you said. And you said, I assumed education mainly happened in the front of a classroom, but quality teaching can and should happen everywhere. So can you talk a little bit about the teaching aspect of your life and also what it means to be teaching everywhere?
Well, I think the teaching aspect of my tutoring job, I think that in your last question, I kind of anticipated this one a bit and touched on that aspect of it because it very much is one-on-one instruction, which is so different from I used to be a graduate teaching assistant at Alabama, and I was teaching to like either 20 kids. Sometimes I get to lecture for the big class. The biggest group was like 400 people. I got to give them a lecture about the Black Death, which was pretty cool. And so that is the one-on-one teaching is so different because with the large class instruction, you kind of hope that they get what you're trying to convey, and you only really find out afterwards if your teaching did the right job. And with tutoring, you're just able with that one-on-one time that you can make sure that they're learning the concepts, and if there's something they're struggling with, you actually have time to really help them through that and get past that obstacle that's been blocking them. And so definitely I think a tutor should be a good teacher. But going back to that teaching should be everywhere. I think even when I was a kid, my family kind of knew that I was going to end up in some kind of academic job because I think my love for teaching comes from my love of sharing cool stuff with people, whether it's about science or history or whatever is kind of currently my passion at that point. And so I have four nephews, and they range from, oh my gosh, from 14 to just going to turn one. And my oldest two nephews, I watched them a lot growing up. And I teach them about like the planets and the first 10 presidents and just all kinds of things. And it's just that it's that sharing that love of knowledge, and not just the specific knowledge, but sharing that passion to go out and learn more and not have to keep that excitement bottled up. And so I think that that's, when I say teaching should happen everywhere. And I think that's the difference between just telling someone a piece of information and teaching it to them, because you're giving them that confidence and that skill that goes with it. And I think that's a really big difference.
Yep, it is. So it sounds to me like you enjoy the one-on-one teaching more.
I really do. I mean, it was fun, a little terrifying at first to get up in front of a classroom because I stuttered very badly as a child. I was in speech therapy for like 10, 12 years. And so getting up and starting to do public speaking was terrifying at first, but teaching is what made it better. So I do want to thank getting out to, classrooms and conferences that really helped. But the one-on-one, seeing a student go from confused to I've got it. I mean, it's such a good feeling.
Yep. Well, your GitHub bio says that you're a lifelong learner. So,
Mhm.
how does that coincide with the teaching side of your life?
Well, I think that the best teachers were the ones that knew that they didn't know everything. Because once you think that there's nothing more you can learn, that you kind of get blocked off. And even in fields where we kind of think that there isn't any new information, there's always new interpretations, new knowledge that's coming to light. And especially now, I mean, I think about the fact that like 5-year-old me, knowing that I have a Kindle in my bed where I can like check out books from my library and just read everything and learn all these things. I mean, she would just be like, "Why aren't you doing this all the time?" And I think that also for part of that lifelong learning is that you're making co- connections. And I think especially I have two degrees in one is a language field, but one's a history field. And I think making connections, and the more you learn and the more connections you make, I mean, it's only going to do good things. So, and it's going to help you see things that you weren't able to. Like, I went to England for the first time in 2000, and it was fun. I was a senior in college, and I was like, okay, this is awesome. We went to see some plays, and we went up to Scotland and we did some touristy things. But then I went back in 2006 or 2007, and I was a student. I was doing a study abroad for part of my master's. So I'd been studying about British history, specifically British naval history. And so when I went there, it was just like seeing the country like almost for the first time, because there was so much more that I understood. And so if I hadn't done that learning in the 7 years in between, then it would have been a bit stale. But I think learning things can make things that you thought that you totally understood and had down. It makes it feel like you're finding it for the first time, which, yeah, it's good.
Yep. That's excellent. All right. What about hobbies? What hobbies do you
Oh,
have?
oh boy. I really have been getting into counted cross stitch lately. Um, about a year or so ago, a friend and I were at it was a Doctor Who convention here in Atlanta, sadly, which isn't going anymore. But there was someone selling geek cross stitch in the dealer's room, and I'm like, I need to get into this, because like all you need is a hoop and the cloth and the embroidery floss, and that's it. And so I've been working on some birth announcements for my nephew, my youngest nephew, and some other babies born in our family. Also working on a Star Trek. My next one to work on is a Star Trek theme wedding announcement that I'm going to do for my husband and I. What else? I like to do painting. When we lived in Alabama, the church we were involved in was super arty. And so a group of us would just hang out on Friday mornings, and we put on some music and we get some coffee and try not to dip our brushes in our coffee. And we just paint for a couple hours. So I have so many canvases around the house. We need more wall. I have more canvases than wall. Let's see. I think this counts as a hobby, starting NaNoWriMo projects, National Novel Writing Month, and never finishing them. I'm trying to get better on that. And of course, food. So those are probably my main ones.
Well, you mentioned food before, and
Yep.
you're a tea drinker too, you said,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I love tea. So that is awesome. I love both food and tea. Um,
So good.
but we're both in this food geekery Telegram group that you
Yes.
talked about. And you post pictures all the time of, stuff that you've made. Your Twitter bio says that you do stress baking before it was cool.
Yep.
So
Yep.
so which is it that you like best, baking or cooking?
Oh, that's not fair. I mean, I think I probably thought about this question so much. Baking or cooking. And I've had this talk with friends because I have a lot of friends who just do one or the other, who really don't want to do both. And I'd have to say baking because cooking's kind of my everyday thing, especially since we've been home and we kind of have to cook a whole lot more. And it's not to say I don't love it, but baking is kind of a special treat because baking, you're usually making, I don't know, a cake or a pie or a tart, or you're baking something kind of fancy and special. And and I've started, oh my gosh, I've discovered artisan flours, and oh my gosh, like, oh, the artisan pizza flour, oh, it is worth it. It makes the best pizza dough, and it tastes like almost pizzeria good. It's fantastic. So, yeah. So if you follow me on Twitter, I can probably recommend some really good meals, but also bread. Like baking bread is just so therapeutic. You just sit there and knead it and work it. And it's kind of magic that you take all these things and I mean, bread recipes are kind of like spells. You do them and you really hope they turn out right, because if they go wrong, it's going to be really, really bad.
Well,
Really bad.
I think cooking and baking are different in the fact that, like,
Yeah.
cooking, you can be more open and you can
Yeah.
change recipes around and you can
Yeah.
put your own touch on it. Baking is more restrictive to where you better follow that
Hmm.
recipe or it ain't going to come out right.
Exactly. Like cooking, it's like you don't even need a recipe. It's like, okay, it's like, I think I kind of look at them for times and temps. Like if I'm roasting veggies, it's like, okay, how hot can I get this? How long does it need to go? But like for spices, I'm just like, and it's hard when my husband's like, oh, do you have the recipe for this? I'm like, no, because I'm kind of like, pinch this, some of that. And it's like, what do we have in the pantry? Yeah, but baking is just, oh man. And I've had some baking failures, mostly as a kid, occasionally as a grown up, and it's amazing. I still like to cook. One of the first things I tried to bake was zucchini cookies. I was with my cousins in New Mexico, and I was like 8 or 9. And we were going to do this big road trip from New Mexico to California. And they had this big garden in the back, and they had how in summer, it's like you get to the point where you have more zucchini than you know what to do with. And so we're like, let's make some cookies out of these. And the recipe said 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt. I read it as 1 1/2 cups. I
Oh,
put
wow.
almost an entire thing of Morton's in those cookies, and they were they came out of the oven, and we tasted them, and they were my and so my cousin, he didn't even put them in the compost because he's like, that's gonna kill the compost. It's like we could have fed them to the deer as salt licks. But what was nice is like, because when I started cooking, I was horrible. I screwed up spaghetti. Um, Hamburger helper was kind of a fancy meal. for
But
me.
this is also goes back
Yeah.
to the fact that nobody's a genius when you start out. You're learning all the time. And this is something you gotta learn.
Exactly. And when you screw up, well, that's why you keep bread and peanut butter and jelly in the house. It's like, okay, that didn't come out the way I wanted. Backup dinner time. And yeah, and I think that's one of the key things is that the cook and baker that I am now is from 20 years of work.
Yep.
So yeah.
So, what do you think your favorite thing is to bake or cook?
Ooh, okay. For baking, it is definitely British tea time treats. And one of the things I've started doing is I love travel, which also is something hard to do now. But I love taking dishes that I've made and learning how to make them at home. And so, like the first time I went to Britain, I think we did like, the typical scones and jam and cream. And I'm like, well, that's nice. The second time I discovered Victoria sponges, which are like these, oh my gosh, they're like little pound cakes, and then they're split in the middle with fresh whipped cream and like fresh jam. And I had those with tea, and I'm like, oh my goodness, these are my new favorite. So that is, I think, one of my favorite things, and it's a pretty simple recipe too. But then, like, if I have fresh raspberries on hand, I'll go and actually make some fresh jam. And a girlfriend and I got her into Great British Bake Off on when I came back from one of my trips. And so what we would do is we would find out what the theme for the episode was, and we'd make a themed bake. And so, like, if it was cheesecake, I made a lime and elderflower cheesecake, which was amazing. So yeah, so I think going somewhere like Britain, which I've been there the most out of all my travels, and I love afternoon tea and just having yummy little tiny sweet things with a cup of tea. It's so good. So I think that's my favorite thing to bake. And like so Victoria sponges, also millionaire shortbreads, because caramel and chocolate and cookies, yes, please. So good.
Well, now, do you consider grilling to be cooking?
Oh man. Yes, it is. And especially I've lived in the South for over 10 years now. Grilling and barbecue are definitely cooking. Not going to get into the what counts as barbecue conversation. I think that I dropped that bomb in the food geekery, or maybe the JB Telegram group of like what counts as barbecue. And oh my goodness, that is a nuclear bomb.
Yep.
Yeah.
A
But
lot of
yes, definitely
strong
does.
opinions.
Very, especially when you get people from kind of like pork based barbecue compared to beef based. Oh yeah, that gets kind of weird. But yes, grilled, oh my gosh, grilled meat, like when growing up, if we go to family parties, grilled carne asada would be one of the things we would do. And oh my gosh, it's that wrapped in a fresh tortilla, just a little bit of char is just so good. Yep, so does count. Sadly, we can't grill. We live in an apartment with a wooden patio. So they're kind of very clear on no flammable things outside. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But we have friends who grill, so that works.
Yep.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, speaking of friends, well, you contribute to Ubuntu Mate,
I
which,
do.
you can talk about Linux there.
Mhm.
I noticed on Twitter that your husband is a Linux user as well.
He is. He is.
So you can talk to him about Linux. What
Mhm.
about your friends, other family members? Do they share your interest in Linux, or can you even talk about it with them?
Actually, I can talk about it with my dad, which is awesome. I was home when was I? Oh, it was in December, and I just signed up for the Linux Academy, and I had my laptop, and I was showing this to my dad. He'd heard of it. He is kind of big into Raspberry Pis and Arduinos. So, like, I swear, I kid you not, he's building a smart shed in his backyard. It's like a solar powered smart shed. It's so awesome. And so I fired up one of the cloud playgrounds, and we went through the little exercise to install the 1804 Ubuntu server and put like this little like snake game on it. And so we sat down and did it, and he was just so, and it was such a cool like father daughter bonding moment. And so one of the things we really want to do is get him a ThinkPad, because he's got, oh my gosh, this ancient Toshiba laptop that I don't even know how old this thing is. So he's like, okay, we're going to get you a decent ThinkPad, and I think we're probably going to send him an Ubuntu Mate, little kind of bootable disk, and be like, have fun. This is going to be awesome. And especially since he used to mostly use Macs. And so like the desktop, two of the desktop environments there would be really familiar for him.
Right.
So yeah, so I can talk to him about it. We've always been the geeks out of our family. And my oldest nephew actually texted me a couple months back and said that when he goes to college, he wants to go for computer science, and he is actually trying to get into robotics, and he's a rising freshman sophomore. And so I was saying, hey, Linux would be a really cool thing to get into. So I'm hoping that can be another kind of thing for us to share. And then, of course, working in a technical college, a lot of my students were either in cybersecurity or they were in game development. And so I got to talk to them with Linux quite a bit. And actually, they were following me in kind of as I'd be learning how to do different things on the command line. They actually would start coming to me with questions. And I'm like, this is actually really cool. It would be nice if I get bonus pay for doing this in addition to English. But yeah, so I'm lucky. And so not only do I have these great Telegram groups and I have my husband, but I've got other people who I can talk about it without having to explain a whole bunch of stuff to them.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Because some people's eyes glaze over once you start explaining.
Yeah, they're just like, oh, really? Just okay.
All right, so let's go back to your early history with computers. What was the first computer that you used?
Oh man, the first one I can remember is probably like using an Apple IIe in school. Um, that and also I remember one of our neighbors growing up had this little, it was almost like a toy computer, but it just did basic programming. And I remember that was really cool. And he would do like, kind of the print statements. But we didn't get a computer, a personal one, until I was in kind of right around high school and when I left for college. I remember one of my girlfriends got, her family got a personal computer, I think our sophomore or junior year of high school, back when AOL charged by the minute. And we ran up there for like, we blew through like their trial period and we ran up some horrific bills on that. And then I think my first computer that I actually owned, I got in 99, which was my senior year of college. And I needed it for, internet. I needed it to write my papers on. Also, I was playing a Star Trek text-based role playing game, like through Telnet, and I needed that. And that was pretty much it. So
Yep.
yeah, and so really my computer background, it was mostly as a casual user until pretty recently.
So what got you into computers recently?
So what's gotten me into computers lately is my husband. He's been using Linux since, oh my gosh, I want to say maybe 2008. So he's been using it or 2006. He will correct me on this. He's been using it for a long time. And I remember when we got married, he has this laptop which he still has now. And he would be like changing, like he would be bouncing between, I think, um Mint and something else. And he would be updating it like every couple days. And of course, me, I'm like, why are you fiddling with your computer that much and reinstalling your operating system? Did you screw this up or something? And then it was just like, okay, totally, because I just had this MacBook, and it's like, okay, I update it when it gets a new thing, and yeah, and otherwise kind of don't treat it that well. And I think so. I kind of saw that he was doing this. I'm like, huh, that's interesting. But then he got a job here in Atlanta, and we moved out, and we had a half an hour to 45-minute commute both ways, which is a long time. And we would start listening to various Linux podcasts. And that's, I think, what kind of got me into wanting to do this more. And so this little tiny, I think maybe for the past few years, I'd been wanting to become something more than just a casual user, to kind of start getting into some of the micro computing, to understand my own computer more. And I think really since I've been married to him, because he's just like, if I'm like, hey, I would really like to learn this, he's just, okay, what do we need to do to get you to be able to do this? What do we need to get from Micro Center? And just that part of me that had always, I guess, wanted to be more of a computer person, but had never really kind of done the work to get there. That he's been really great at just helping me in that process.
Well, that's awesome that he
Yeah.
has helped you along with that.
Yeah.
So you hear about Linux from him.
Mhm.
You hear about Linux from the podcast that you're listening to.
Mhm.
What makes you want to install it on your own system?
Well, what was funny is that the first time I wanted to install it was actually back in 2002 or 2003. I was working at an indie bookstore. And I remember at that time seeing the Linux books in our computer section. I want to say they were the Wiley guides. And I remember I checked one out of stock, and I'm like, oh, I could put this on my computer. That would be great. And then for some reason, I didn't do it. And I'm just like, I don't quite know why. But I think that one of the reasons why I wanted to was because, well, I knew that my MacBook was starting to get kind of old in the tooth. And I knew that I kind of necessarily didn't want to get another one once it finally died. A, those are really horrifically expensive.
Yes.
And B was, I think I really wanted to kind of just my husband was so passionate about it. And the people on the podcast that we heard pretty much every weekday were so interested in it and just so enthused about it. And I think it's kind of that contagious enthusiasm that is like there must be something to it. And so it must have been maybe a year and a half ago that I'm just like, hey, can you talk me into um, how do I put a Linux distro on one of the partitions on my desktop? And I think he was, oh my gosh, he was so incredibly happy. It's like, I really did marry the right person. So,
Oh, I love it.
mhm.
So, what was the first distro? Well, first of all, did he walk you through the process? Did you do that, or did he put it on for you?
He walked me through. And that is one thing that's so great is that he really does want me to kind of get these skills. And so it's like, okay, here's the resources that you need. If you get stuck, let me know and I'll answer your questions. But otherwise, it's like he really wants me to kind of be able to understand it. So yeah, no, so he totally walked me through like how to put the ISO on the USB. I think the only thing he might have done just himself was the partitioning bit because that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. I I feel very comfortable partitioning my own computer now. I did not then. I would have done bad things.
I don't
So
recommend any new person
yeah,
partition their own
just
discs.
really bad idea. So
So, what was that first distro that you tried?
Ubuntu Mate.
That was
First
the first one you tried.
that
All right.
was.
Okay, so you're a Mac user, right?
Mhm.
And you install
Yep.
Ubuntu Mate. What is your first impressions of it? What were the pros and cons of it?
Well, the first thing I did was that I put it on the Cupertino layout, which is basically kind of a very similar version to kind of the Mac desktop. And so I was like, okay, this kind of feels like what I'm used to. And so some things one thing I noticed that I really liked is that on MacBooks, the way they do the photos is the most Byzantine closed off system. Just trying to get your photos off is so impossible. And then when I opened up Kaha, it's just like, okay, this is actually pretty easy to find. And I just noticed that the things that I need to be able to work on a computer, it's like, where's a word processor? Where's Firefox? Like those things were all there. It's like some things with the installs were different. And as I've kind of gone on, I've gotten more comfortable just installing from the command line. I think I did back in those days, kind of did more of the GUI based installers. But really, it didn't seem like it didn't seem like an insurmountable difference. Like, oh my gosh, this is so different. I don't know what's going on. It's like, okay, I know where the basics are, I know where to find things. And it seemed like anything I had trouble with, really, it clearly wasn't that huge because I've stuck with it for a long time and haven't really been tempted to start distro hopping. So,
Well, if I can help in that way, I will because I can help people distro up.
yes. Yeah, I know. Yeah, there's a lot of people. Yeah. And I think that it's like, I think I would like to maybe start trying some different ones. Like the hard drive I have on my current computer is huge, so I could have a few other distros going if I wanted to, and I think I would like to. I think I am also planning to put Elementary on my old MacBook. So
Elementary is very,
mhm.
very nice.
Yes, and it's just and now I'm running the Pantheon desktop environment, which I think is kind of our version of the Enlightenment. And oh my gosh, it's just beautiful. And also Dan and Cassidy are both seem like really awesome people.
Yep.
So yeah, yeah. So yes, so I think I might dip my toes in distro hopping a bit, but otherwise I kind of am like the anti-distro hopper. It's like I found that one, I'm like, okay, I'm good. I'm awesome.
So do you use Windows or Mac in any way at all?
I use, well, when I was working at the office, I would use Windows on my work machine there. I do have my MacBook that's mostly, well, in the before time when my husband and I would go out to coffee houses. But now it's mostly when I want to sit in the comfy chair in the living room. Um, that's really pretty much it. I might put Windows 10 on my desktop now. Um, the Epic Store had this. They made Civ 6 for free, which is like $70 worth of games. It does not. But unfortunately, Civ 6 on the Epic Store and Wine do not get along at all. I've been on the Lutris forums, and everyone's like, "Yeah, it's just this can't quite be fixed." And especially since to play a free game, I might just go ahead and put a small partition on pretty much just for that. Also, possibly to play with the Windows subsystem for Linux as well. So,
Yep.
but that's pretty much it. I really haven't been tempted to go back to it as like a daily driver in any sort of way.
All right. So do you have like a workflow of any kind as far as keyboard driven, or do you have a set of software that you need to do your job?
Let's see. The basics are Firefox and my 50 gazillion tabs that are open at any time. Let's see, for the Ubuntu Mate web pages that I help with, do those in a variety, in either, been trying to use Genie because it seems to cause much less problems when I go ahead and push those pages up, and not having spaces that our other team members will then have to edit out. Have also gotten into Joplin lately, and Joplin is great. I've started trying to use Visual Studio Code. I am very much very much a beginner in Python, and I just kind of like the look and feel of that. Um, let's see, Git Kraken. That is just, oh my gosh, that's been so helpful in just especially working with a team and trying not to screw up our upstream repositories. That one is just, I've been using it for a couple months now, and it is really nice. And pretty much Spotify for tunes. And those are pretty much my regular programs that I use in any given day. And pretty much for Lutris for gaming. So,
Yep.
which is a really nice program.
Well, speaking of games, I usually
Yes.
ask all of the people that are on here, "Are you a gamer?" So what is your favorite genre of games that you like to play?
Definitely kind of role play / atmospheric games. Pretty much games that aren't pew pew, kind of like first person shooter games. I'm horrible at them. Anything with complicated button mashing is just not my thing. But things that are just visually gorgeous, I find I really love those games. And games with just a really great story. And I think I find myself drawn to indie type games a bit more. But also my guilty pleasure game is probably The Sims because it's fun to just have wreak havoc in the lives of virtual people. Yeah. And it's great because on my newest computer, it runs on Linux better than it did on Windows on my old one. It's stunning. It's really nice. And I joked with my husband, he really updated my computer a couple months back. And I'm like, you realize you're getting me this ridiculous graphics card so I can play Sims. And he's like, yeah. It's like, okay. But I think that those really are my favorites. So lately my favorite has been this game called Abzu, which is this puzzle game. So kind of like a bit of a Myst game, but it all takes place underwater. And part of it is like it's this meditative game where part of it is just like it's like, okay, there's a dolphin that swims by you. You can grab onto that dolphin's fin and just swim with it. And it's just like, if you play that for like half an hour before bed, you are just in this zenned out, blissful mood. And it runs because that's on the Epic Store, and Lutris runs the Epic Store and that game just amazingly, which makes me so happy. It's just beautiful. So,
well, I have it. I just have never played it yet.
Oh, okay. So you need to play. It's best played like if it's kind of dark. So that's like kind of the main source of light, because it's one of the most beautiful, relaxing games that I've ever played. And my inner 10-year-old who wanted to be a marine biologist, oh my gosh, it's just like, we're swimming with dolphins. This is amazing. So it is a very good game. And I think the actual gameplay time, like to kind of solve all the puzzles, I don't think is that long, but it's just meant to be like, hey, here's this cool world, explore it. Those are my favorite games.
Yep. Very nice. Favorite game of all time? Sims, maybe?
It might be Sims because, dude, I've been playing that for 20 years. I remember getting the first Sims and staying up till 3 a.m, just like working on their house and things. So I think I would have to say of all time, probably Sims.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's get into Ubuntu Mate.
Okay.
How do you get involved with them?
All right. Well, obviously I've been using them for a while, but what kind of sparked me to get involved with the team was that I applied for a job with Canonical in January of this year and had a great interview experience. It was fantastic. And I didn't get the job. And instead of being, this isn't going to go anywhere, it's just like, okay, well, I can still be involved with the Ubuntu project. Why don't I see about getting involved with part that I actually use? And so on Telegram, I've become friends with Bill, Frank's MCB or MBC. I can't remember how the
we just call him Bill.
Bill, I know, so much easier. Oh my gosh, we've been talking on Telegram forever, and he is just, oh my gosh, the most welcoming person. Just like he's like this one person Linux ambassador, and it's amazing. And so I had been chatting with him. It's like, hey, so it's like, I really want to get involved with an open source project. I love if it could, I'd love if it could have anything to do with any of the Ubuntu flavors, especially the one that I use. And I knew that he was on the Ubuntu Mate team. And I told him, it's like, listen, I can't code. It's like, I can't code to save my life, but I am good at editing and writing. And that's one of the things I've been wanting to kind of do more of. It's like, okay, here's the skills I have. How can I put them to nervous for this new community that I'm a part of. And so he talked to Martin, and then he's like, okay, we actually could really use your help because we were migrating the web page over into Jekyll. And as part of the migration, we also needed to update the pages. And there were also pages that needed to be written for the first time. And so, and it was just, I mean, any team with Bill on it is going to be fantastic because, again, he's great. But it was just, they were really welcoming and encouraging, especially when there was like, when I screwed up on Git the first time and I'm like, oh, sorry to push something that had all the changes you got rid of the last time. But they have been really helpful. But yeah, but it was just, I think that it was that, I had done something to get involved in a professional way, and that didn't quite happen. But then it's like, wait a second, this is open source. I can be involved as a volunteer. And it was just, and really it was that talking to Bill. It's like, listen, I can edit, I can write. Can you guys use those skills? And he was really the one who helped get that ball going.
Well, that is fantastic.
Yeah.
I love that. And you're right. Bill is such an awesome spirit in the community. He loves the community itself and the people in it. And he is always, always putting others before himself.
Yeah.
So
he sent my husband and I these in the mail. Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. It's like, oh my Bill, you're fantastic. So yeah.
So you write some of the content for Ubuntu Mate and you edit the content for Ubuntu Mate.
And so what I did is that some of the sections kind of didn't need as much of an overhaul. So as we move them into Markdown for the Jekyll site, then I just kind of had where the language could be a little cleaner, kind of just clean things up. But really what I enjoyed most was writing things really from scratch. And the two big sections that I really enjoyed the most were the history and the get involved. And it was, writing those was just such a joy. And I think part of it was because it was like, okay, if I was wanting to get involved, what would help me? Like, what would really bring me into this project that would point me at the resources that I need, the skills that I need, the people I need to talk to, and that I got to do it in this very kind of playful, fun way that kind of goes with the whole kind of tone of the site. That it's very informative, but it's just very it's very cheerful too. So, and it's, and also, especially since on the get involved, was working actually quite a bit with Bill on that one. So, since he's on the QA side of the team. And I'm like, I know what you guys do is super important, but if you guys but he definitely did the work on those parts. And so those were just so much fun to write. And I definitely do have some thoughts for future writing, like doing profiles on the individual members of the team, letting people know kind of what is involved in in our typical QA process or in other aspects of the projects, just to let people know it's like, hey, for this distro that you use, here's what goes on behind getting this out. And so really would like to kind of use any future writing I do for the site to really help the Ubuntu Mate community connect, and also just really hopefully reach out to more people who want to be a part of it. So
that is excellent, because that gets lost a lot of times. What gets lost is the people behind it. And I think having a profile page for each member would be fantastic because it would let people see the personal side. Like,
Hmm.
you download a distro and you install it, and you can make any judgment call on it that you want, whether you like it or not like it. But when you see the people that are actually putting all of this effort into it, it goes a long way. So that's an excellent idea.
Yeah, and especially since so many of these distros are just driven on volunteer effort, and usually by you're right, very small teams. And it's just, and I think that letting people see, it's like, who, I think it's always better to know, like, the things like who grows your food and who makes these things that make your everyday life better. And I think getting to see and know them, might, and so I think that definitely kind of humanizing the distros is a very good thing.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I
yeah.
want to go back to something you said. You mentioned about how you made that mistake and pushed something up to get up, but whatever.
Yeah.
But I think their reaction to it is important, and I think part of the reason that they reacted to it that way is that they probably did the same exact thing when they started. So
Yeah. Yeah, which is good. It's just like, it's like, and I think that's, I have that in my work. Like when I have a student who struggles with some part of grammar, I could be like, how do you not know how to do that? Blah blah blah. Or realize, hey, when you were 19 and trying to do these things, you screwed up too. It's like, also, you screwed up in something you wrote last week. So, and I think that, choosing to have patience with people and help them grow rather than that snap judgment of, oh, why can't you do this, is just better in every forum of our lives.
well, I want to I want to say another quote that you have written,
Hmm.
and it says, "I have to admit, manually setting up a LAMP server running Ubuntu 1804 and then successfully installing WordPress on it made me ridiculously proud." So, for people who may be in that same position, wanting to learn, but hesitant about doing something, can you talk about what led you to the point of doing it and then overcoming it?
Yeah, and it's for that particular moment, and we're let's just say that we cheese and a couple other people in the food geekery group, and we're still trying to do this, but picking a global pandemic to try and get a website started is a really bad idea. um but we had decided that we wanted to go through with this site, and we got the digital ocean droplet, and I was like, I knew that I could talk to John. He'd set up lamps servers for some of our other things, and it was just like, no, I want to do this. And so he, again, kind of like the other processes, kind of sent me the pages. And it's like, okay, here's the guide, and it's like, again, if you get stuck. But it was something that I knew I wanted to take more ownership of these things. And instead of just asking people to do something for me, to have them instead point me, where do I start? Where do I learn to do this for myself? And thankfully, I knew if I screwed up, well, I just would start over. There really wasn't too much harm done. But I think that it was that I wanted to have the follow through. I wanted to not only go, hey, I want to learn this, but do what I actually had to learn it, to actually try things out and not be afraid to screw up. And I think it's such a big block that we're worried about what other people might think, or we're worried about how we're going to feel if we fail. But the thing is just, you don't get anywhere if you're afraid of failure, because you're going to screw up. You're going to make cookies with enough sodium for a month, in them, or you're going to do something else. But if you let that paralyze you or stop you, it's just, your life is going to be a lot less joyful and interesting and meaningful than it could. So I think that was what made me say, hey, instead of, hey, can you get this going on DigitalOcean? It was like, can you help me do this on my own?
Right.
And yeah.
Awesome. I love it.
Yep.
So you're helping out Ubuntu Mate. You're helping out Linux and the open source community. Is there any special memories of things that you've done, something you're proud of?
I think, oh gosh, the day that the website went live, which I think was a week before the 2004 launch day, that was just like when I sent that last push up with kind of my final changes. It was like, this is going to sound kind of strange, but I remember thinking, it's like, okay, it's like the next time I see you, you're going to be out in the world and doing some good. And seeing the new page with those things that I had contributed and that now we're part of the project, just, I couldn't tell you how proud that I was. And then when 2004 went live and going to the website from the welcome, and it's just like, so this distro that I had just heard about for the first time in 2017 and just started using about a year and a half ago, now I was part of that and helping to make it better. And it was this incredible feeling. So yeah,
That
that
is
was
awesome.
really good. That was really good.
Well, you're into Linux for a few years. Have you ever been to any Linux conferences?
This was supposed to be the year of the Linux conference for us. Obviously not.
Obviously not. I'm sorry to hear that, because I was looking forward to going to one myself.
Which one?
Self.
Oh, dang it. We were going to go to Self because we can drive to Self.
Oh,
and
my.
we can probably make it in one day. Like, I mean, we could drive to Linux Fest Northwest, but that would take like 4 days. So next year, fingers crossed. So
2021.
2021, exactly. So Self is definitely one of the ones we want to go to because it is fairly close. It's kind of our backyard one. Some of the other ones we've talked about going to here in the States are Texas Linux Fest, Linux Fest Northwest. I really want to bring my dad to Scale. Since it's in Pasadena, which is I grew up in Southern California. Pasadena is one of my favorite cities in my home state. It's beautiful. So I'd really like to take him to that. I think that he would have a blast. Also, internationally, I have not jokingly told my husband that once we're able to, I want to do a European vacation in the fall that hits up UbuCon Europe and All Camp, because I think those both take place in October. It's like we could do a Portugal, England trip. That would be fine. So yeah, so we would really like to go to some of those. So once we're able to travel, then yes, we and it's great because now we would know some of the people there. And it's just, and because we interact with them in the Telegram groups. And so knowing that we would have friends that we'd get to meet for the first time is just, that makes it, I think, even better.
Yeah, there is something to be said for meeting all of those people in person. You know, you mentioned you talk to them every day, and I had the same Linux Fest. Self last year was the first Linux conference I went to, and you get there and you start hearing voices that you hear on the radio or hear on a podcast, and you walk up to them and you start talking to them, and it's just an amazing feeling. Getting to meet, like I said, some of the people that you talk to every single day is absolutely awesome. So
Yeah.
that's definitely an enjoyable moment. I can tell you that.
Yeah. So we are so excited about that once we're able to. And we're kind of kicking ourselves for not going to self before, but it'll be there and it'll be awesome.
Yep.
So fingers crossed.
So some people are open source enthusiasts to the point where they don't want to use anything but open and free software. Some people are on the pragmatic side of things where they'll use whatever the best tool for the job is, even if it's proprietary software. Where do you fall into that?
I think I fall more on the pragmatic side, though. And there's certain things that I run on the computer, especially things like Spotify, things like Teams, that do help me use Ubuntu Mate as my daily driver and or make it a more enjoyable experience. With that being said, I have been trying to kind of find, like, if there is an alternative and it works really well. I've been trying to make more of an effort to use those. Like, we one of our quarantine projects, especially now that we have a spare computer that can now be a home server, is setting up a Nextcloud instance. And so we can use that to sync things between our computer at home. So we can sync things like Joplin notes, so I can kind of transition things off of my Google Drive. And so I have been wanting to, where I can, make more of an effort to find open source options. Yet at the same time, try not to, for me, throw out the baby with the bathwater. And if I can have Spotify and have my tunes and that helps me work, then that's going to be really nice. So,
Yep.
yep.
Agreed. I'm in that same boat. So,
Mm-hmm.
well, I started using Linux because I could customize it years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I would try to customize Windows and fail at it because you pretty much could not do anything with it. Um, over the years, I have found the community to be awesome. They have an infectious feel about them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, to me, is the best reason to run Linux right now. What drives your passion or your love for Linux?
I think it's really a similar thing, because when I first thought about using it, like back in 2002, I think it was just like more, it's like kind of an abstract curiosity about it. But now it is this intensely personal thing, because for so many of the things that I use, I know the people who are putting so much hard work into making that. And really, I think that's why I wanted to not only use it, but kind of pay some of this back and have that payment be beyond, something like um, a Patreon donation every month. And the community, I think we got so lucky with the community we fell into. And because really, my Linux community started out with my husband. And as we heard, and it became something that we both shared. And really, where my entrance into the community started was, I want to say, January 2019, because because of all those podcasts we heard, the Ubuntu podcast was my favorite. I had no idea what they were talking about for the first like 4 months. I'm like, okay, there's something about like the Unity desktop and people are really mad about it. And there's something about Mir. And I'm like, I don't know what these things are, but they all sound really nice. And it's a super friendly podcast. And I specifically asked, can we make sure we listen to this every week? And he's like, okay. And they take their break from January to Marchish. And so while we were waiting for them to do their curry lunch and decide if they were going to come back, there was something on their Twitter account with a link to the Telegram group. And I knew that my husband had been on the Jupiter Broadcasting one. And I'm like, well, let's sign up for Telegram then. Oh my goodness. Fateful decision, because then I found that the group, for the most part, was like the show, just full of really friendly, helpful people. And, and through that group, we got to know Bill. And then I also signed on to the JB Broadcasting group, and we got to know Cheese, who is just also very much a Bill.
Yeah, Cheese is another powerful force in the community.
Just a force for good who wants to really just see that good grow and find other people who are community builders and really get them involved. And so, oh my gosh, he's fantastic. And so really that community, and it's interesting now to think of projects and like for the Ubuntu flavors and thinking about Budgie, it's like, oh, I know a couple of people on the Budgie team, and it's like, wait, what? When did this happen? And, not to say that the community can't have issues, but I'd say we were so lucky where we landed, because the supportive, helpful people outnumbered kind of the less than helpful people and kept us going. And because, sometimes you want to get involved and you kind of stick your toes in, and then you meet the people and you just kind of back out. And for me, it's really been the opposite. I dipped my toes in, and people were, for the most part, like, the water's great, come on in. So
it's definitely a big thing for that first experience, when that first dipping of the toes in. What kind of experience you get out of that is going to be measured in how long you stay with it or not.
Or whether that's the first time you ever put your feet in the water and go to something else. Because we have tried going to one in-person lug here, and it just did not work. We're just like, this isn't our thing. And so we kind of came back to our virtual lug, and we're like, okay, guys, thank you for being you, because oh my goodness, that just wasn't our style. So, and it might be some person's style, and that's great, but I think having communities that kind of reflect all these experiences that we're coming from is good. So,
well, I want to get your overall experience of the community. You mentioned a couple things here, but you have a great vantage point of coming into this recently, and you can probably look at it in different ways than somebody who's been in it for many, many years. So is there something that we as a community should focus on to try to do better?
I know that it seems like one of the big conversations that's going on is kind of, how do we keep these projects how do we keep people going in these projects? One of the things that I'm doing recently is a submission for the Google season of Docs. And one of those things is a volunteer kind of onboarding thing. And I know that any of us who have been involved in volunteer things know that people can get it, just especially when it's a small group, that you can get burnt out really fast. And so I think one of the things that as a community that we can do is that for the users is, maybe, I know it's hard when things are broken or when things don't work the way that we want them to kind of not go into, from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Violet, who wants things now. It's not to go into that mode, but just to realize, like, I sent an email to one of the people for the organizations that I'm going to do a proposal for, and she was just like, oh, I'm sorry it took so long to get back. It's like, this is your volunteer thing on top of your job and top of your life in this super bizarro world that we're all in now. It's like, it's okay. It's like you wrote back. It's like I was, and so I think giving ourselves a little bit of grace. I think that is a really key thing. But also, and this is something from a bit of personal experience, is that I know that I am a person who I find it really hard to ask for help. Like if I have a full thing of dishes in the sink, instead of doing the rational thing and be like, hey, honey, can you help me with the dishes? I'm like, look at this big pile of dishes, rah, rah, rah. And I do it and I'm burnt out and I'm kind of mad. And so I think that sometimes for us, it's really hard to say, I know it's like that this is overwhelming, that I just need a little bit more help now. And I think that sometimes those are conversations that are really hard. And I know that there's some really good projects about trying to keep open source projects viable for everybody involved because they're passion projects. But passion, it only goes so far. You also have to have understanding and help and kind of frameworks to kind of keep something instead of from being this bright flame that just kind of burns out to this steady fire. So, and I think that I know that there's some good conversations going on in the open source world about how do we make these projects work for everybody. But I think that it's also good to kind of, for those of us who are kind of in the bigger community, saying, well, what can I be doing on my own, either as a user or a contributor, to kind of help with that process and make these things that we love, make them last, and make the people who make them feel like their work kind of isn't in vain. So I think that that's really a key thing.
That is a big thing. And there have been many developers behind the scenes that have stepped away or backed out for a while, took a break, whatever, because of that burnout. I think that is definitely something that we need.
Yeah.
Contributing. You just mentioned it. There's many people that feel they can't contribute to Linux. They don't code. They don't do anything specific. You yourself are an example of how you can contribute back to Linux and back to the community. What would you say to those people who are searching for a way to contribute?
Jump in. It's such, and I'd say just take that deep breath and ask. And if you don't know, find your bill, find your, like, and
Find your
just
cheese.
find your cheese. New motivational book. Find my bill and cheese, and just be like, hey, I'm new. It's like, I want to be involved. Can you point me to resources that I can do this? And I think that, realizing that, and I think thankfully a lot of projects are starting to do a good job about making it clear that you don't have to be a developer to contribute. But I think one of the other things is know that your skills are needed, either whether you're just kind of using the features and just saying, hey, can you run this and tell us what the experience is like? That's something you can do and especially it's like, you are the user of that product, and getting your feedback in the process is so vital. So not only can you be involved, but oh my gosh, your involvement as an ordinary user is just crucial. Or things like translation. Do you speak a foreign language? Oh my gosh, everybody needs you. And things like documentation. I think I was really worried that documentation was going to be super technical and super like, oh my gosh, is this something I can do? It's like, no, it's just like, can you take ideas from different people or take feedback from different people and present something that's understandable and clear and has a certain tone. And if that's your passion, chances are some skill that you have that you are super excited about is going to line up with some projects need. And so I think that the first step is just to have confidence and to know that you're very much needed and very much wanted. So,
Yep.
and then find your bill or cheese, reach out to people to say, how do I get involved? And then also for me, I think finding a project that just aligns with your own kind of passion and interest too. I know that if you're working on something that you are just super enthusiastic about, then it just makes that click so
Yep.
much faster. So, so don't feel like you have to volunteer for something that you're not really into, because it's okay. Take the time and find something that just kind of sets you on fire. So,
But take that first step.
take the first step and know that we need you, especially people who have been kind of nervous to step forward, that that your contribution, your thoughts, your experiences are really needed, and that there's so many projects that really want you. And so I think the first step is believing that you can, and then it's kind of just go forward from there and carry that confidence.
Well said. Very well said. So, you come from the Mac world. Is there any software that is currently not available on Linux that you'd like to see come to Linux?
More native ports for games. But I know that one we're waiting on. One of the programs I'd love to see come, well, in a better form to Linux, would be Scrivener. It's this program that it's for novel/screenwriting. It's great. It's a word editor, but also it's so much more. You can organize characters and locations and scenes, and I have it on my MacBook, and it's fantastic. The Linux port it's a fork of one of the older Windows versions, and it's kind of in not great shape. It's really awkward. So I really would love to see, and I know that they tried, and part of me is like, well, maybe this is something for a future project. It's like, I would love to see this come to the Linux desktop. That would be great. Maybe that's something I need to find who is working with that and help me make that happen.
That would be a great step.
Yep. So that's really those are really the only two things that I can think of.
All right. So I usually ask people about, the year of the Linux desktop, but I guess I'm going to ask you a little bit differently. Is that the wrong approach? We talk about community. We talk about, infectious with this love and passion for Linux. Should we just continue on like that and not worry about the year of the Linux desktop?
Yeah, I mean, it is a hilarious meme, but I think that it really makes us wonder, where do we want to put our focus on? Is it just getting the desktop on more computers, or is it really building up the community of the people who sit at those desks? So, and so I think maybe kind of it sounds horrifically cheesy, but maybe more something like the year of the Linux community, and kind of working on, like those goals that we talked about. It's like, how do we get more people at the table? How do we keep ourselves from burning out? How do we have key conversations that we need to have, but have them in a respectful, productive way? And it's like, maybe that's where I don't think it would be bad to have our focus be there for a
Yep.
bit, because if you have a thriving, healthy community, well, then you're going to have, then and I think that's maybe our most important resource there, because otherwise the desktop environments and distros don't just write themselves. I mean, we haven't gotten to that point yet where hopefully we never will, but yeah, but it's the people behind those. And so, kind of thinking about more about what we can do for all of us. So I
Well,
think,
that
yeah,
goes back to what we were talking about, is knowing the people behind it. It's
yeah,
not just something you're using as a tool. It's not just a computer. It's a way of life of getting to know where your food comes from, getting
yeah.
to know the people behind where your computer comes from.
Hmm.
That is an extremely important thing, to have that kind of relationship with it, because that's what keeps people.
Yeah,
Like, you could install Linux today and tomorrow uninstall it and put something else on if you wanted to, but it's the community and the people that keep you here.
yeah, exactly.
All right. So have you made a decision on text editors? Because you, you have said that you are wrestling with choosing a text editor for life. So,
Okay, full disclosure, I did the Vim class on Linux Academy. I feel not as shaky using it, even though I have a cheat sheet. I think that Nano is just going to be my default, and I'm not going to have shame in that. And it's funny because I think when I was in college, we used something very similar to Nano. We had these ancient VAX terminals, and I can't remember what we used for our email, but it was ancient. But I'm pretty sure that whatever editor we used for that was really close to Nano. And so I think there's something that feels kind of warm and fuzzy and slightly nostalgic. So yeah. So I'm gonna stick with that. So
final answer.
final answer.
All right. If you could change one thing about Linux, whether it be the community or the operating system itself, what would it be?
Oh goodness. I think just that is a that is such a big question. Um, I know one thing that would be really great would be to have it available on more things. I know that there's times where kind of buying a computer and knowing it's like, well, can I put my favorite distro on this is tricky. So I think I would love to see it have more mainstream use, because it's just like especially I'm thinking about my family members on their computers. They run their word processor and their internet browser, and that's pretty much it. And there's no reason that they couldn't do that on a Linux machine. And so would love to see kind of more use out there. And God, that does bring us back to the year of the
It
Linux
does.
desktop. Dang it. We can't escape that. But that's really one of the only things. So that's really what I can think of that we kind of haven't already covered. So
Very nice. All right, Monica, is there anything else you'd like to share with people?
I guess a final word of encouragement to anyone who's kind of on the fence about getting involved in the community. Oh my gosh, if I could, and I just, if I could, anyone could. So just, it is totally worth it. So, and yeah, and feel free to find me on Telegram or Twitter, and I'd be happy to, answer questions or give you inspirational gifts and speeches and all that good stuff.
That's awesome. Monica, thank you so much for sitting down with me and having such a great conversation. Your
Thank you.
perspective on everything is awesome. I love it.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. This is just, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So this was really great. Thank you.
Well, I do want to thank you for your contributions to Ubuntu Mate as well. That's
Thank
much
you.
appreciated.
Thank you. Of course.
All right, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you all for joining us this week as we spotlight the best thing about Linux, our community. Until next time, long live Linux.